Welcome to Talkin' SEC. Writer, photographer, and producer Phillip Jordan discusses all the latest in college football in the Southeast with the best analysts around. Now from the southeast corner of Alabama, a state that knows sports, here is Phillip Jordan.
What's up, everybody? Welcome in to Talking SEC. I am your host, Phillip Jordan from Last Word on College Football, where I cover the Auburn Tigers and some occasional SEC stuff, and 96.9 The Legend in Dothan, Alabama, where I'm the in-studio host and producer, Dothan Woods Football. You can check out Talking SEC on all your favorite podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, please subscribe, rate, and review. Leave a review. I will read it on a future edition of the show. I love getting you guys feedback. I love getting to share your maybe negative or positive comments about what I'm doing here. You can also do the same on YouTube. There is two places on YouTube you can find the episodes. My personal one, the Phillip Jordan Sports YouTube channel, or there is also a Talking SEC YouTube channel as well. Go check out either one of those. Hit that subscribe button. Hit the bell for all your notifications. And if you leave a comment on any of the videos, good or bad, read it also on a future edition of the show. And you're probably asking, as we open this episode of the show, what is outside the footprint? And why are you talking Ohio State football on an SEC podcast? Well, I am glad you asked that question, because that is something we're going to do here on Talking SEC, particularly here in the off season from time to time. And that is, I will bring in a guest from a non-SEC team they cover, talk about, so on and so forth. And it will be a team I think there's potential for an SEC team to maybe meet in the college football playoff. There's a handful of teams out there that meet that criteria. And Ohio State, to me, is the top of the list. Alabama, Georgia, maybe outside shot, Texas A&M, Ole Miss, I think already contenders in the SEC that could potentially get to the college football playoff. But I do believe one of them will play Ohio State in the playoff. I am super impressed with Ohio State. I don't really see a challenger in the Big Ten. I know Michigan won the conference last year, but I think Ohio State is going to be better. And you're going to hear that in my conversation with Jay Stevens. And there's some SEC conversation between me and Jay in our talk here as well, because Jay is not just tuned in to Ohio State football and college football as a whole here. So that's what we'll do from time to time. So for you who's wondering why I'm having an Ohio State guest here on Talking SEC, that's why. And you can expect that throughout the summer, different stuff here on the feed related to college football. We're SEC show, we venture out and outside the footprint every now and then. And after that, I'll give my thoughts on all the spring games from this past weekend. Some quick thoughts on those games. I won't spend too much time on them, as we'll be talking about these teams in the next upcoming weeks and months heading into the 2022 college football season. An LSU running back has hit the transfer portal. I'll give you more on that, and some basketball news as well. Hey, basketball season ended a while ago, but does not mean the conversation on hoops is over. We had plenty to discuss there. Got two news items I'm going to talk about here on the show. And remember, you can always email me also at sportstalkphillipjordan@gmail.com. Now, let's go outside the footprint. Let's talk to Jay Stevens from Locked On Buckeyes. All right, everybody. And as I said in the open, something we will do here on occasion, especially in the off season here on Talking SEC, because I think just as SEC fans out there, you need to not just know about your conference, the big teams outside of the conference, the national contenders who you should be focused on and watching them as well for playoff time, because we know the SEC, we're used to get two teams into the college football playoff anyways. But joining me to talk about who I think is the biggest threat to Alabama and Georgia, because everybody's going to be all on them when it comes to the preseason polls, that's Ohio State Buckeyes. Super impressed with them this past Saturday when I watched their spring game. And join me, there's only one guy I go to talk about the Ohio State Buckeyes. That is Jay Stevens, host of Locked On Buckeyes and the Jay Stevens podcast. Jay, as always, it's good to talk with you.
Phillip, man, I'm honored to be back on the podcast. I'm honored that I am the voice of the Buckeyes for your podcast and for anything you're doing. So I appreciate that respect. And I know SEC fans might not like some of the things I say about the Buckeyes because most of them will be positive. But as Phillip said, there aren't many teams outside of the SEC footprint that can come close to being in Alabama or Georgia. Ohio State is one of those teams, and I'm glad to represent them here on the podcast.
I think, and look, I'm not the biggest Urban Meyer fan. If you've ever listened to me talk about Urban Meyer, there's usually not compliments. It's usually negativity about Urban Meyer.
Okay.
But one of my best friends is a Florida fan, and he puts him on Mount Rushmore with Steve Spurrier. I do not. I'm just not.
College football Mount Rushmore?
Well, Florida. He thinks, Urban Meyer is just a great man. And
but is this an SEC Mount Rushmore or college football Mount Rushmore?
I think just Florida, just the Florida related stuff. I mean, he did win 2 national titles there, but he was good. He's a really good coach. I've never said that, but some of the off the field stuff with him, and I think the Jacksonville stuff confirmed some of what I have felt about Urban Meyer for a long time. But I will say this: when he went to Ohio State, I think he changed the recruiting landscape at Ohio State, from Dren Tressel to him, different player. Really, and you hear this around. Some people may get offended from other conferences when you hear this, because you heard it with Florida State and Jimbo Fisher and Dabo at Clemson. It's an SEC looking team in the ACC. And when I see Ohio State, and that's because of Urban Meyer, I see an SEC, what I'm used to seeing in the SEC of the elite teams, just because of that speed that you don't see a lot of other Big Ten teams have. And I feel like Urban Meyer is the reason why now you can put Ohio State, while they are comparable to the best teams we have down here in the SEC.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm still stuck on that Urban Meyer Mount Rushmore thing. I'm not the biggest Urban Meyer fan either, for various reasons. Even going back to his time in Florida, I think that he kind of showed the kind of recruit, kind of player, kind of person he was looking for. He kind of accepted certain qualities, overlooked some other qualities, and kind of got the success on the field because of that. But yeah, he did change the recruiting at Ohio State. It's one thing. It's one of the reasons why Ohio State is a program it is right now. The recruiting that he started back when he first got there, it's gradually gotten better. It got sustained, the level that he's put it at. Then it got better under Ryan Day. So you could say a lot of negative things about about Urban Meyer. There's positive qualities, negative qualities. But one thing you can't kind of overlook and kind of try to put a negative tone to is the recruiting, because he did a phenomenal job at Columbus once he got there, changing things quickly.
Yeah, and then he knocked off the big bad Nick Saban in the first college football playoff. I mean, I remember going into that, nobody was giving Ohio State a chance. Cardale Jones, quarterback. Ezekiel Elliott, running back. I mean, just all the talent Ohio State had there. But I just remember going into that, and I was one of them. I'm not going to sit here and say I wasn't. I thought Alabama was going to go in there because it was Nick Saban. Give him all that time to prepare. He's going to get you. But it kind of started with that. You beat Alabama. I mean, that's something you can go into recruit at that point from then on. With Urban Meyer at his time at Ohio State, you can go into the South and say, "Hey, I beat Nick Saban. I did it at Florida, and I did it at Ohio State. You come here, I can get you a national championship because I can beat the big dog down there in Tuscaloosa."
Yeah, so my buddy Jeff Hunt, you know him. We conversate and talk on Twitter. He talks about how literally that game kind of changed Nick Saban. Like that loss there in that semifinal game, I forget what bowl game it was, maybe it's Sugar Bowl, but that game alone itself changed Nick Saban and how Nick Saban recruits and his philosophy on offense and defense, because he realized how quickly Urban Meyer changed things in Columbus and how the offensive things were a little bit different than maybe Alabama could have combated and really pushed to win that game. They pushed, but Ohio State really showed that they're not afraid of anybody from the South. And as much as we talk about Urban Meyer's recruiting, I'm going to get these names right by the end of the show, buddy. I'm not going to try to combine these two. As much as Urban Meyer gets credit for changing recruiting at Ohio State once he got there, Nick Saban should get credit for how he responded, quickly rebounded after that loss in the very first college football playoff semifinal game that Alabama played.
Yeah, because the following year with Jake Coker as his quarterback, they won it. And then against Clemson, that was the first matchup with Deshaun Watson. And then the next year they get there and they lose to him. And then he's won a couple, titles since then. So, yeah, it did change things. That was the first year with Lane Kiffin, too. So it was a lot of experimenting and stuff like that with them, too. But it's kind of, go back into the Buckeyes. And you were in attendance at the spring game, and just what was the atmosphere around? Because watching on TV, it looked like it was very well attended.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of want to look at some of these spring games, how well are they attended? Looked like a great crowd on Saturday at Columbus, and just what was the overall feel and environment on Saturday?
Excitement. It was a good crowd. It was my first time being in the Horseshoe, so I have never been there. I figured this is a time that I'm in a better spot now in life to where I'm able to go out and see different stadiums and do different things sports-wise that I'm not normally able to do. So this was one of those things. Check it off the bucket list. Go to the shoe. Got that done. But it was a phenomenal crowd. 60,000 people there for a spring game for a practice. It's literally a practice. You're getting 60,000 there in a scrimmage. It's phenomenal. It was a great feel, a lot of excitement. Phenomenal tribute by C.J. Stroud of wearing Dwayne Haskins' jersey. They put DH on the 7-yard line, but near one end zone. And then at halftime, the last play of halftime, they took Stroud or whoever the quarterback was off of the field. Delay of game, great kind of tribute to Dwayne Haskins. Ryan Day gathered up the entire team together in the middle of the field and watched a tribute video for Dwayne Haskins. But that was a great tribute for him because he unfortunately is no longer with us. But, man, it was great. I mean, it was a great feeling, great vibe. Buckeye fans came out. I drove 2.5 hours that day to get there. I know somebody else drove from North Carolina to get there. On the way up there, I saw a car from Tennessee going to Columbus. So, I mean, just like Georgia, just like Alabama, football's different. And when you get to these programs where football is different and there's excitement around the spring game, fans are going to show up and show out. I liken it to this. I'm going to close. I could go on all day. But I liken it to this. We see all over training camp of the NFL how training camp, you may have a Saturday thing, you may have a Sunday thing, and they get all these promotions to try to get kids, try to get families to come out. They know school's important, but they try to get people. I know with Indianapolis, the Colts always have some type of promotion, something with the family. You ain't never going to get 60,000 people to come out to a training camp practice. That's not going to happen. Even if it's a scrimmage between offense versus defense type of thing on a Saturday, you're not getting 60,000 people on an NFL franchise team to come out for that. It's not going to happen. College football is different. That's why I love it. And that's why you love it. Alabama fans, Georgia fans, Tennessee fans, doesn't really matter. South Carolina fans, Florida fans, doesn't matter who it is. If you're in the South, if you're around the country, college football is different. It's a different breed. So if you get 60,000 in the Horseshoe for a practice, literally a practice, it's great, man. And from what I've seen from Ohio State, I do think, I'm going to make this statement now so I don't have to say it later. Alabama, Georgia, Florida, anybody down there in the South, you better keep your eyes out for the Ohio State Buckeyes, because this team this year, I do believe, is primed and ready to help Ryan Day and lead the Buckeyes to win a national championship. Not saying they're going to win, but this is a team that is primed and ready to make not only another playoff appearance, but I think they're going to win that one game, semifinal game, if they get there.
So, usually when I do this in off season, I'll start with offense, when I'm looking at teams and stuff like that. Because, in the past, I've done the 14 teams and 14 weeks thing with SEC previews. So I'm not doing it different. I'll do it here. I'm going to start with the defense, because that was a big question mark. Really, it's been a struggle the last 2 years. You date back when Ohio State played Alabama in the national championship game on the 2020 season. And then last year, you can disagree. You can tell if you disagree, but you guys, I believe, just from afar, they're not in the playoff last year, not because of their offense. Their defense wasn't up to snuff. But now with Jim Knowles coming in from Oklahoma State, Oklahoma State usually under Mike Gundy was not good defensively. He turned them into a top 5 defense. And now you're going to Ohio State, no disrespect to the fans out, at Oklahoma State. If anybody's checking this out, you can get better players at Ohio State than you can at Oklahoma State. I'm just going to say that now. I'm not afraid to offend some folks with that. And I think Ohio State's got some good players. What they did with Jack Sawyer was very interesting. Moving him around as they did, defensive end, more in a linebacker, that hybrid role. Would you look at Ohio State defensively? What was the issues the last 2 years? And now with Jim Knowles, what do you see the positives with him there and what they can be defensively in 2022?
One major problem with Ohio State over the past couple of years, it goes back to COVID, and I don't believe it was all based on COVID. But I think that COVID was a big problem with Ohio State, especially how locally in Columbus and the state of Ohio, how they responded different than a lot of the states and cities down in the South. And so I do think that going back to the COVID, Ohio State really was not physically up to the standard that Ohio State is at as far as health-wise, as far as like physically, how do they look, muscle-wise, being in shape. I think that really hurt them in 2020. I don't think they got back to that properly in 2021 and 2021. I think in 2022, when I look at it right now, this team looks like the defense looks like a top-tier defense is supposed to look physically. Like, I'm not trying to be like, oh, you're just saying that because you're an Ohio State guy. No, they legitimately look like a team that physically looks like a top-tier defense is supposed to look by the eye. They get off the bus, you say, oh, those guys might play defense. Why? Because they look a little bit different. One guy's a little bit crazy in the head. That's just how things are. It got to be. That's just how I think this defense is looking. I think it was a toughness factor that missed. But ultimately, I just think that sometimes they didn't have the right guys on the – last year, they didn't have the right guys on the field consistently. Their rotations were crazy. I think that sometimes they played 25-plus guys, maybe sometimes 30 guys on defense in one game. I mean, I'm not exaggerating by these numbers. One of my gripes of the team last year was you're rotating linebackers and defensive linemen and corners and safeties. And I'm like, these guys need to get some type of consistent play to get into a rhythm. But no, you guys don't let them do that. So I think that we're going to get more – I'm hoping Jim Knowles is going to get more consistency in the rotation. But this team just looks different. Linebackers look sound. They look crisp. Guys don't look out of position at all. You bring again Tanner McAllister, who's going to be the cover safety or nickel corner, depending on what type of terminology you use, who's going to be not only a coach on the field for Jim Knowles coming from Oklahoma State with the new D coordinator, Jim Knowles, but also he's going to be a guy that fills a need on the team. It's going to be a phenomenal player. Like, you want to go to Oklahoma State and get to the NFL, great. But you want to if you go to Ohio State and want to get to the NFL, you might get drafted earlier because of the brand. I mean, I'm just being honest with you. That brand, being a DB at Ohio State is phenomenal, especially when you factor in Denzel Ward just got, $105 million from the Browns, highest paid, corner or defensive back, something in NFL history is great. So I do think this defense, man, from – Zach Harrison, well, if you want to talk about players, we can do that in a little bit. But Zach Harrison, Teron Vincent, Steel Chambers, Tommy Eichenberg, Ronnie Hickman, all these guys, they're ready, primed, and ready to turn things around and play in a way that they did not play last year.
Yeah, you brought, Tommy Eichenberg. He had, 10 tackles by halftime. I mean, he was all over the field. Now, I know the way they started the spring game, too, we'll jump in. I guess we can touch on it a little bit. It was not pure tackling or tackling at all, the start. And then they eventually got into that. I started watching. I was like, what is this? Are we having two-hand touch here in a spring game? I mean, I know the quarterbacks don't ever get touched hitting these things. I'm like, is no one allowed? But then obviously the announcers explained it on on TV that what they were doing. But and look, with them defense, I mean, obviously, like I said, offensively, what they're able to do, we're going to jump on offense here in a few moments. But they turned up that defense up. I mean, honestly, and I know Michigan beat them last year, but I don't see that happening again if this defense is not even doesn't have to be great, just be good. Because as we're going to get to in a few minutes, the offense is going to be so awesome.
I mean, think about what you just said. The defense doesn't have to be great. It just has to be good. That goes to show the standard of the offense and how prolific and how efficient the offense is going to be. But simply you noticing that and acknowledging the defense doesn't have to be great, just has to be good, means one thing to me, Phillip. Last year, the defense wasn't good. Neither were they great. And so if you go from that standpoint, you look at how Ohio State was neither great nor good on defense last year, but this year all they have to be is good, not great. This defense, I believe, will be good because they know the offense is going to do so much for them, make it so easy that as you saw last year in the Michigan State game, you get up quickly in Purdue. You get up so quickly. You get up 21 points. You take away that running game, and it's going to be a pass-happy attack from the opposing offense to move the ball down the field. Well, you got guys at the secondary that are going to be some of the best. It could be the best secondary in the Big Ten. I'm not going to make a statement say they will be, but there's enough talent back there in the back half of the defense for those guys to be the best secondary in the Big Ten. I love what I've seen so far, and I do believe with Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau being defensive ends or sophomores, I think that can be a good defense. I want to make a statement here. I don't think I've made a statement on Locked on Buckeyes, so I'll say it here first. I know it hasn't hit Twitter. The two guys that started at defensive end for Ohio State on Saturday, they're in jeopardy of not being starters the entire season. Because from what I have seen, Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau, even though they're second-year players, those are the two best defensive ends on Ohio State. And with the versatility of them being able to have their hands on the ground and then be a stand-up and be able to drop into coverage, I think the two guys, I'm not saying names on purpose, I think the two guys that started in the spring game on Saturday are in real jeopardy. I mean, real jeopardy to not start every game this year.
And, if you're doing that effectively on defense, with, like you said, guys that either have their hand in the ground or they're standing up, what that does to opposing quarterbacks, because they have no idea what's coming their direction. And they just add, and offensive line, really. I mean, offensive line, they don't know what what they've got coming at their direction either. So when you have that ability defensively, I mean, it just opens up so many different things you can do and so many different looks. And I mean, I just, and then watching the spring game, and yes, it's a spring game. I know everybody's gonna holler at me about that, but still, it just shows that, like I said, you don't have to be great, be good, and that sounds like good to me.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I mean, you said it so well. This team is ready. Like, they're legitimately ready. Denzel Burke, Cam Brown at corner. They're going to be two guys. I'm not going to say they're going to be lockdown guys, but they're future NFL players. Cam Brown's a guy that's trying to get to the NFL. Denzel Burke has to play at least one more year before he's eligible to go to the NFL draft. This team is ready, man. Like, I'm not worried about the defense this year right now. I'm not at all. And normally I'm really hesitant about the Ohio State defense of late. They don't have the consistent first round, second round linebacker play that we're used to at Ohio State. But from what I've seen, man, I know the Alabama fans are like, man, you're crazy. No, watch the film. Alabama has Will Anderson. It should have been in New York last year. He should be in New York this year. I'll say it for you. But watch this defense. They don't have a Will Anderson on that defense. They don't need one to be good, to be a good defense. That's all they need to be. It's just good.
Yeah, I almost think it's a crime that Will Anderson has to play another year of college football, to be honest with you.
I mean, yes, but those are the rules. And think about it.
Yeah, I know. Just from a talent standpoint, I think he's ready. That's him and Bryce Young down here. And I know, and people are gonna say, well, you're just an Auburn writer saying that, so they can get them out to Tuscaloosa. Well, I know there's two guys probably behind them. They're just as good. So we can cool off if they do. We're going out. That will be just as good. But I think, especially with Will Anderson, I mean, if he could have came out, I think he'd be the first pick in the draft. But you can't do that.
Phillip, I actually like this about college football. It's what I miss about college basketball. You get these guys that have to stay at least 3 years. You get to know them, get to love them, get to see their every move, get to see them have a phenomenal season, and then get even better. I love that about college football. So Alabama fans, I would say cherish the fact that you have him there for this season. Because in the NBA, if it was college basketball, he'd be gone. Like you already basically know he's gone. Top 3 pick, easy, based off how he played. But the rules are different for the NFL, and I love that because we get to learn more about players. Fans get to get more love for players. Commentators get to drill more about the players that got to college level. So I love that. I like the rule, and I love that he's still here because we get to talk about him here on you get to talk about him on your podcast.
That's it. You can talk about him on the Jay Stevens podcast. That's all you want.
I could.
I mean, I don't know how it would play on Buckeyes SEC stuff. Since there's that rivalry between the Big Ten and SEC. But anyways, hey, we're bridging the gap here, Jay. SEC guy, Ohio State, Big Ten. We are bridging that gap. But anyways, let's jump to offense with CJ Stroud. Now I'm going to ask a question. I'm going to read off his stats from last year: 72% completion percentage, which I don't care what level football you're playing. That is impressive to have that kind of completion percentage. 44 touchdowns to 6 interceptions, 4,435 yards. Hey, got a Rose Bowl victory against Utah in a great game to close out the year. So I'm going to ask you what may be a stupid question to some when I read the stats. Where can he improve?
Here's one kind of facetiously saying this. Don't miss a game because you're injured. He missed a game last year against the Akron, which probably would have put him over 45. Probably would have had 4,600, maybe 4,700 passing yards, 47, 48 total touchdowns, 73%, 74% Completion percentage, maybe 75 because the Akron's defense was not good. But those, I mean, that's it. Honestly, using the running game more, a better running game makes him better. And then him being able to be more elusive in the pocket and using his own legs makes him better. I don't think I just fine-tuning the passing, but a lot of it is the rushing attack. And also having a better offensive line, because the offensive line last year had some issues that people don't really want to talk about, but it still has some issues. I do believe, though, his running ability will open up the passing lanes for him easily. He's not going to be a run-first guy. More of an old-school approach to being a quarterback, which I actually love. I like that mindset about him. But I do think, though, him using his legs and using his God-given ability with his arm, the ability that he's worked on and gotten better by just his own sheer talent and drive and determination to get better, his hard work. But ultimately, man, I think it's his legs. I think if he uses his legs a little bit, I'm not saying a little bit more, I firmly think that makes him better because he's going to have the receivers. His guys will get open every single game. Not worried about that. Open up September 3rd against Notre Dame. I'm not worried about these guys having trouble getting open against Notre Dame. I'm not at all. But I do think, though, the way he can get better is utilizing his legs. And think about this. That was a little bit different. If Steve Young didn't run, different styles of quarterback, don't get me wrong. But if Steve Young didn't run, he wouldn't have been the quarterback that he was. Or didn't move around. If Aaron Rodgers wasn't mobile, didn't move around like he does, he wouldn't be the quarterback that he is. There's guys all throughout the NFL in college that without their legs, I mean, they get better because they know how to move around in the pocket and utilize their legs. That's a phenomenal way. That's an easy way for Stroud to be a better quarterback this year.
Yeah, I hear Greg Cosell call that, which he goes on so many shows, out of structure plays, what you can do there. And look, and that's one thing with football, quarterbacks have to do more of. And I think the big reason these offensive line just don't get to hit people anymore in practice like they used to. I think in football, offensive line has taken a dip. I think at all levels, especially college and pro. And so now you got to have that guy in the back there that can. I mean, the Tom Brady's are pretty much a dying breed at quarterback. How he plays. So you got to have that, and he seems like a guy that's got that ability. And you talked about his weapons, Jackson Smith and Jigba. You got him at receiver. Thank you, Jay. We and him practice that. Make sure I pronounce his name correctly. Pre-recording. He led the Big Ten in receiving last year, 9 touchdowns. But then you got Marvin Harrison Jr., who stepped it big in the Rose Bowl, 3 touchdowns with Olave and Wilson, out. But I don't really not want to talk about Jackson Smith here, but I'm looking to talk about Marvin Harrison Jr. Do you think this is, obviously the son of Marvin Harrison? How big is it? I mean, for him to now, he did what he did in Rose Bowl, but to take that and make that consistent to be that second guy next to Njigba.
You know what's weird about this whole situation? Brian Hartline, wide receiver coach at Ohio State, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, they were all asked, were you surprised by the things that Marvin Harrison Jr. did in the Rose Bowl? They're saying, no, we expect it. Like, they're not surprised by, even that player we're not really highlighting here, but Jackson Smith and Jigba, same thing. I mean, he broke Rose Bowl records in the most recent Rose Bowl. They're like, this is expected. We see this every day. This is who he is, which is pretty scary. Another thing is scary is Njigba's going to be in the slot. I think technically going to go by words X or Z. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. will be the X. I do believe Emeka Egbuka will be the Z. So I do think Marvin Harrison Jr. is not going to build off of that Rose Bowl performance, which you may want to use that just for writing purposes. He's just going to do what he does, and I think that's who he is. What we saw in the Rose Bowl is who he is, who he will be. But as he gets more open passes, and he gets more time on the field, you're going to see that he could easily be a 10 touchdown, 1,000 receiving yards type of guy this year. I don't know if he'll get 100 catches. That's a lot. Ohio State almost had 3 guys with 1,000 receiving yards, 10 touchdowns, and 100 catches. Like, that's absurd. It could happen this year. The running game is going to get better, so it's going to kind of muddy up the receiving yards that these guys are going to get. But I do firmly think Marvin Harrison Jr. is just going to do what he does, and that's going to be on Front Street every time he's on the field this upcoming season.
So I told you I was going to ask this pre-recording.
Oh, boy.
And, this is a SEC pod, so I'm going to connect Ohio State with Alabama a little bit. Jameson Williams, who was at Ohio State, transferred Alabama last year, had a tremendous year. I believe if somehow the Kansas City Chiefs can get him, he matches what they want to do just with his pure speed. But, there was jokes made like, man, how good is Ohio State's receiving core if Jameson Williams had to transfer out? So I want to play a little what-if game.
Oh, boy.
If he had not transferred to Alabama, where in your mind would Jameson Williams been on the Ohio State depth chart last season?
He either would have done one of two things. Replace Chris Olave, and Olave would have been the fourth receiver, or Williams would have been the fourth receiver. One of those two spots. I don't think he's better than Garrett Wilson. I don't think at all he's better than Jackson Smith and Jigba. So I do think it's either moving Chris Olave, which I don't think they would have done at all. Especially you want to make Buckeye fans really mad. Bench Chris Olave in his last year. You're going to get an uproar. You want to get guys going crazy. It's crazy. I don't think they would have. I think Jackson Smith and Jigba earned that slot spot, which is why he transferred. Jameson Williams transferred. So I really think it would have been Chris Olave would have been on the backside, but I don't think that would have happened either. So that leaves only one other option. He's the fourth receiver at Ohio State. So people saying he couldn't get on the field, I think it's false.
Yeah.
I think Ryan Day would have put him on the field, used four wide receivers, and sparingly used the tight end during games. So you say, Jay, is that a different philosophy than Ryan Day? Absolutely. Ryan Day does not want to take a tight end off the field. Ryan Day is a guy who'll use a tight end and an H-back, but his H-back is more of a fullback, 6'1", 240, 245, that type of body, that type of build. He will use that all day. I get tired of seeing 12 personnel. I'm like, right, dude, look, you don't need to keep these guys on the field. You have so much talent. Use it. But this is his philosophy. He keeps rolling with it. I think Jameson Williams would have been the fourth receiver, and I think Ryan Day would have been desperately pushed to use four wide receivers, which I think would have just made C.J. Stroud the Heisman Trophy winner. Sorry, guys. I definitely think if you have four receivers with that talent on one team on the field at one time, sorry, forget it. I know what Bryce Young did. I know he won the Heisman. I know he did phenomenal things. C.J. Stroud would have had a better season. Absolutely would have had a better season than Bryce Young if he had those four guys on the field. Because once Stroud figured everything out, playing football was so easy for him. Just walking through the park. I think it would have been so much easier if he had that fourth receiver last year.
I mean, they're a nightmare to deal with as they were. But if you were a defensive coordinator up in the Big Ten and you'd have to deal with all four of those at the same time, it's kind of comparing to me a couple years ago when Tua had the four future NFL receivers he had. Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith, Jerry Jeudy, and Henry Ruggs all at one time. I mean, when you've got four receivers like that, I don't even know what you do defensively. I mean, what just play back and just hope you can hit the quarterback. I mean, that's your only choice, because there's no way when in college football you go up against receivers, and like the ones Ohio State have now, you're not going to hold them, because you're not going to have three defensive backs that are good enough to cover. You may have one that can take care of one, but you got those options. I mean, in college football, I'd just be praying if I was a defense coordinator, have to deal with that every Saturday, or have to, if you're in the Big Ten or anywhere with those level receivers.
Well, think about it. And even in the NFL, you don't have four corners that can guard those guys. Like, it's a luxury for the teams that have a number one, true number two cornerback. And then your nickel corner is legitimately that guy. That's a huge luxury, because most times you take a dip with your number two corner, then your nickel back is either going to be good, solid at that position, or kind of just thrown in there because you have nobody else to put there. And you hope your strong safety can potentially play one-on-one or kind of do some zone coverage to kind of guard these guys. But that's about it. But here's the thing, though. We talk about Stroud, talk about zone coverage. If you put those four guys out there, they're going to find the holes in the zone. Like, that's the problem. The crossing routes and then having the combinations of flat route and a crossing route and then having a curl to the flat and things like that, or double move on the outside. These guys are so good. They're going to find the hole in the zone. So just like you expect NFL guys to do it, the same thing's going to be for elite receivers in college. They're going to find the hole in the zone. So not only do you not have the number of corners or defensive backs to guard these guys, you also have to realize they're going to find the hole in the zone. And if our tackling is poor, like what we saw Utah was different because Utah, they just ran away from these guys. But Utah also missed some tackles. And what you saw was once they got open, once they caught the ball, and if you don't get them down immediately, those yak yards go up and through the roof because they're just too good. They're just literally too good to stop with zone, man. All of them on the field together. It's literally a nightmare.
And that is why, to circle back, as we close out here at the beginning of our conversation, while Ohio State Buckeyes. Now, I think Alabama is above Georgia going into this year. That's just my opinion, just who they've got coming back and who Georgia lost. But when it comes to a team outside the SEC that people need to be paying attention to, you guys need to pay attention to Ohio State Buckeyes because they are elite and they are there. If they meet up with Alabama and Georgia in the playoff, they are a threat. Unlike Michigan, they are a threat to knock off an SEC team if they play them in the college football playoff. Jay, we went a good 30 minutes here. I know we could probably go hours with all the football stuff, but it's always good when I have you on the show. It's really been fun having you on Talking SEC, Talking Ohio State Buckeyes, kind of looking at that team. And, again, why SEC teams should be paying attention to what they're doing up there in the Big Ten. But if the listeners and viewers wanted to check you out, where can they find you and what you got coming up on Locked On Buckeyes?
You guys can follow me on Twitter at jstevens07. That is Stevens with a PH. Locked On Buckeyes every single day, Monday through Friday, giving you all the news you need to know about the Ohio State Buckeyes, basketball and football teams. Also, the J. Stevens podcast coming at you once a week. Planning on doing a little segment in the month of May, which I think is going to be very enjoyable. That's not a sport specific. Women in sports do not get the attention that they deserve, and a lot of them get treated like they're from a third world country because they are a female. To me, it's atrocious. It's embarrassing for human beings to treat women like second-class citizens, like they're from a third world country. And so I want to try to do a little something where I'm going to help them get what's on their chest, get it off on a platform to let people know what it's like to be a woman in sports, to let people know kind of how women feel when they get treated a certain way. If you say something to a woman, how do they take it? And they kind of see like how can things get better. So Women in Sports Month is going to be the month of May. There's 5 weeks or 5 shows I'm going to try to do in the month of May. So that was a little longer tease for what I have planning for the Jay Stevens podcast in the month of May. But I definitely think there are stories from women that we need to hear, because these women, they do a phenomenal job with the sport. Some are podcasters, some cover I want to reach out to someone that covers IndyCar. Trust me, there are some phenomenal women that know their stuff that literally get looked at like they're crazy when they say things that are intelligent about sports simply because of their gender. To me, it's atrocious. It gets under my skin. And I think that this time of year and this podcast is going to be a great spot for them to let that off their chest. Sorry, Phil, that was a little bit longer than I expected, but this is one of the great things coming on the Jay Stevens podcast.
All right, everybody, go check them out. Follow Jay. Check out Locked On Buckeyes. Keep an eye on what they got going on, because I just feel there's going to be a Buckeyes Ohio State versus SEC matchup in the playoff this coming up college football season. And check out all that good stuff coming up on the Jay Stevens podcast. And Jay, as always, I appreciate the time, and I look forward to doing it again sometime down the road.
It's fun, man. Loved it.
All right, and once again, thanks to Jay Stevens for coming on today's edition of Talking SEC and Outside the Footprint. Jumping on and talking about the Ohio State Buckeyes, who, once again, I've said this plenty of times on the podcast, who I believe will be playing an SEC team in the college football playoff. And they're a really good team, and as you heard Jay break down there. So now I want to look over some spring games from the past weekend, and this goes all about last Thursday. And not going to go long on these, just some quick thoughts on these games. And, of course, y'all know me, a lot of quarterback talk when I talk about these spring games. For Georgia, and I'll go ahead and give you guys a heads up on Thursday's podcast. I'll be joined by Palmer Toms from Dogs HQ. We will go in detail about Georgia Bulldogs and their spring game with him on Thursday. So if you're a Georgia fan, make sure to check that out, podcast or YouTube. We posted the videos up on Facebook and Twitter as well. So videos will be everywhere, audio will be everywhere. Just please go and check it out. But Georgia, I'm just going to say tight end. And you'll hear me talk about this with Palmer Toms on Thursday. Black defeated Red 26-23 in that one. Brock Bowers and Darnell Washington are out. Eric Gilbert, 2 touchdowns. And when Bowers and Washington are healthy this fall, that three-headed monster at tight end is going to be so dangerous for the Georgia Bulldogs. Stetson Bennett, he was 15 of 35, 273, 3 touchdowns. He did throw 2 interceptions. I mean, he's the starting quarterback. Without a doubt, you know he is going to be quarterback. Defense is going to be fine at Georgia. I know they gave up a lot of yards and gave up some points in the spring game, but this game really felt like it was tailored over to the offense. So don't get too excited about the defense. The defense will be really good again because the brain trust over there and Kirby Smart and Will Muschamp. But what they're going to be able to do with tight ends, really the tight ends can set themselves up so well in the middle of the field and open up things for the receivers on the team. I mean, they're going to be good at running back. They're Georgia. I mean, Georgia's going to be one of the top 3 to 5 teams in the country. I think they're going to take a step back this season. I do not think they repeat as champions. I'll just be honest with you there. But I do like this team. I don't see anybody in the regular season pushing them. The best team in their division is Kentucky. Kentucky's going to be good. I think Kentucky should be and will be the second best team in SEC East. But there's just so big of a gap between Georgia and the rest of that division. The Oregon game, I don't think will be much to worry about for Georgia to open up the year. Be when to meet up with Alabama in SEC championship game. And really, if Georgia plays a close game there, they could get back to the playoffs just like they did here, because I think Alabama is going to be one of the better teams. Obviously, you heard me say that with my conversation with Jay Stevens. The Alabama spring game on Saturday. Team White defeated Team Crimson 25-7. I'll be honest with you. I watched some of this, and Bryce Young and the first-team offense did not look great. Offensive line had problems, which, and again, when you're trying to block Will Anderson in that Alabama front, it's going to give you problems. But, last year was a big issue at Alabama at times where their offensive line had trouble. Against Georgia, they had to go to the quick passing game just so they could keep pressure off of Bryce Young. And, it's the spring game. You don't want to overreact, but you kind of got to wonder about the offensive line in Alabama and what's that going to be. And, they've got some guys coming in, the Vanderbilt transfer, but we'll see what happens. But I've got a little bit concerned about the Alabama offensive line after watching the spring game. Quarterback Melrue, he was 149 yards and 1 touchdown, 1 interception. He was very impressive in Alabama spring game. Jamar Gibbs, the transfer from Georgia Tech, 100 yards in this one, 1 touchdown. He may be looking to be the guy that's going to be the starting running back for Alabama. And we know how they get to do with running backs, and they're going to need that running game to take pressure off of Bryce Young, especially if the pass blocking is not going to be there for Alabama. I'm just saying, I'm looking back at the offensive line. That's one of the big problems they had last year. Oh, for their sake, they better hope they don't have that issue again this year, because I do believe Alabama, if that is shored up, they are the best team in the country. Because defensively, I don't think anybody's going to be able to deal with them. I mean, with Will Anderson in that group, Alabama may have one of their better defenses they've had in some time. Mississippi State, they did not play their spring game due to weather. They didn't have it at all. They still got some spring practices they're going to have. Arkansas still has some spring practices. They played theirs inside because of weather, and it really was a scrimmage. There's not much I can give you off. It was a practice. I saw what was going on. I didn't really watch much of it. They did give a new contract, or it looks like a new contract to Sam Pittman, which they should, for what he has done for that program, turning them around the way he has. Yeah, there's no doubt he deserved that. Florida played their spring game on Thursday. Anthony Richardson, he's the quarterback. You can tell. There's no debating that. He was 18-24, 207 yards, 2 touchdowns, hit 8 different receivers. Florida's a young team. They got inexperience in certain positions. They're going to have to grow up. There's going to be some growing pains, I think, in year one under Billy Napier. But I like what I saw to Richardson. And the numbers 18, 48. It's a spring game. The quarterback doesn't really have to worry about really getting hit in that situation. But I will say this about him in the game. Man, he showed pocket poise in that. He stayed in the pocket and delivered the ball. He did have 22 yards rushing too as well. And when you get in regular games, real games, that running threat of his will also become a big factor. And he can really settle in as a quarterback out of the pocket, throwing kind of the way we saw in the spring game. Florida's got something there at quarterback, but there's going to be some things they're going to have to work through this season coming up in year one of Bill Napier. South Carolina played their spring game on Saturday. There was a ton of spring games this past weekend. Garnet beat the Black 20-13. Story Spencer Rattler. Everybody's wondering what he is, what he's going to look like. I've said this. Look, he had his problems at Oklahoma, but that is a great acquisition of talent by Shane Beamer. He went 8 of 10, 79 yards, had a 30-yard completion to Xavier Leggett. Outside of that, nothing too fancy with the passing game. And look at all these spring games. It's going to be very vanilla with what you do offensively and defensively because you don't want to show your opponents anything coming up to the season. But like I said, a lot of passes to the running backs. We'll see with him. He's a talent, but he doesn't have the same amount of talent at South Carolina that he did at Oklahoma, which he said Oklahoma was a very toxic situation. You saw them comments from last week. And I like what Shane Beamer's doing at South Carolina. Look, that team, talent-wise, was not a 7-6 talent, but he got them there. They found ways to win. They upset some people on the way. They got bowl eligible. They won a bowl game against North Carolina. I think they're ahead of schedule with him. And there's a lot of positive energy, I think, with the South Carolina program right now. Vanderbilt, and only Vanderbilt fashion, 32-32 tie, offense versus defense in here. My thing is, what you going to do at quarterback? I think Vanderbilt's got an interesting situation on what they need to do at quarterback. Do you go with Ken Seals, the more traditional passer, or do you go with Mike Wright, who had a 50-yard touchdown run in this game? For me, I think if you're Vanderbilt, you need to go with the more running quarterback that has that ability to make plays with his legs because you're going to not be the most talented team on the field most times, especially in these SEC games. You need to have something that gives you a little shot in the arm. I think Ken Seals is a solid pocket passer. He's a solid passer. He's not bad. But for what Vanderbilt is talent-wise, I think Mike Wright might be the best option there. But we'll see how that shakes out. We have two teams in the SEC that have still yet to play their spring games. Well, Tennessee, but Tennessee's not going to play one due to some renovations at Neyland. We have LSU and Ole Miss playing their spring games this Saturday. And LSU is now without a running back. LSU running back Corey Kilner has entered the transfer portal, and he's actually going to Cincinnati. A few hours after he announced he's going in the portal, he's going to Cincinnati, where he is from the Cincinnati area. He's a former 4-star recruit. This past season ran for 324 yards and 2 touchdowns. LSU's pretty solid, though, there at the running back position. John Emery Jr., Armani Goodwin are there, and you also have Penn State transfer Noah Cain coming in. So they're good at that position, and maybe here he just thought, hey, it's a loaded situation. I can go to Cincinnati, who has an opening at running back. They're looking for the next starter. Maybe he thought, hey, I can go there. I can play more. It may not happen for me here at LSU. All right, finally, we're going to talk about 2 SEC news items in basketball. Vanderbilt Scottie Pippen Jr. will enter the NBA draft. He will hire an agent, so that is it. He is done. He is not coming back for his senior year. He's a 2-time All-SEC first-team performer. This past season, he led the conference with 20.4 points per game. First time a SEC player has averaged 20 points per game a season, back-to-back years since 1996. Seen some stuff on him, some reports. A lot of people don't think he'll be drafted, so you'll probably see him play in the G League. Just maybe he's going for the money. Maybe there wasn't the NIL situation for him. But, that's the thing, too. I kind of wonder with a lot of these guys now that know they're not going to be first-round picks in the NBA, they'll just go and stay instead of going second round, probably playing in the G League, just come back to college and get an NIL deal. But looks like I'm wondering if that was not on the table for Scottie Pippen Jr. Florida new head coach Todd Golden. They land VMI transfer Trey Banham. He's a 6-foot guard who averaged 13.6 points per game, 4.4 rebounds a game, and 4 assists per game in the 2021-22 season. He's a 35% three-point shooter, which will come in handy for the Florida Gators. He had a 31-point game during the season against Samford. He is a Mobile native, and this is the third transfer Todd Golden has brought in since he's been hired with the Florida Gators. He also brought in Will Richard from Belmont, who scored 12.1 points per game, and Alex Fudge from LSU, who very talented player, has a lot of potential, only 3.3 points per game for LSU, but bringing in some talent there is Todd Golden in Gainesville. And that's going to do it for this edition of Talking SEC. Once again, thanks to Jay Stevens for jumping on the show. Had a lot of fun talking with him. Be back on Thursday. We'll talk Georgia football with Palmer Toms from Dogs HQ. We'll talk about all the latest headlines and look ahead to the Ole Miss and LSU spring games this upcoming Saturday. Remember, you can follow the show. You can check it out over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please follow, subscribe, whatever, rate and review. Leave a review. I will read it on a future edition of the show. Go check out on YouTube, either the Phillip Jordan Sports YouTube channel or the Talking SEC YouTube channel. I'm going to try to put more effort into that one. Hit the subscribe button, hit the bell to get the notification, and leave a comment on a video. I'll also read those on a future edition. And also remember, you can email me at sports.phillipjordan@gmail.com. I would love to hear from you. And as always, guys, let kindness be your compass.
Thank you for listening to Talkin' SEC. Follow Phillip on social media at PJordanSEC and the show at Talkin' SEC Pod. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcast or wherever you get your podcast. We'll see you next time when we're talking SEC.